one of the co-founders here at Hireful. Hireful are essentially a recruitment software company. I'm responsible for AI in two ways. One, AI within our recruitment software product, but also we're rolling out AI within our organization here. We're a 50 staff SME. So that's, and those are probably the two areas where I'll bring insights today, along with Ryan, who's from the Neat House team, who's going to be providing, I guess you're providing the legal expertise, Ryan, but you've got AI, you get exposed to a lot of this AI stuff as well, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we use it occasionally for things. The legal sector is very much taking this stuff on board. A lot of our sort of precedent banks, PLC, LexisNexis, they all have legal AI built into them now, and a lot on the research side, but also on the generative side. So yeah, we're finding both with our clients using it and the issues they have, but also it's navigating it ourselves as lawyers. Yeah, it's a very interesting time.
Interesting times. Yeah, that's a good way of phrasing it. Okay, so let me just give a couple of quick housekeeping slides. So just quickly to introduce Hireful, we've got about 600 customers in the UK, typical customers between about 20 to 2,000 staff. We run a ridiculous amount of training events. So we'll be able to share some of that with you a bit later on. We'll share the slides, the recording. There are a few other little assets as well. We'll give you access to them as we go. And then housekeeping wise, we're on Teams, so just ask questions as we go. We will sort of pause. I know Saul's on that. He'll let us know if there's any urgent questions we need to get to, but we'll pause and reflect on those questions as we go. Itinerary wise, we're going to look at the safe AI, things to plan before your team starts using AI. We'll discuss whether we can just ban or discourage staff from using AI, and then some best practice ideas. We're going to keep it really practical today. There is a bunch of PowerPoint slides here, but we've got a lot of live stuff I'll show you. And because we've got a recording, don't panic if that's a bit too fast. We'll go over it, and there's other content you can access as well after today, including, I'll mention it later on, there's a chart, there's the opportunity if you want to book in one-to-one with me. I'm not a consultant, I don't charge for my time, but I'm keen to sort of talk to people about AI that are embracing it or having obstacles, because the more we understand what typical customers are facing with AI, the better we're able to build our products and services. So I'm offering a free 1-hour consultancy session as well. So bear that in mind. And then the start and the stop is where we're really going to lean on Ryan's expertise, where clearly it's a bit more of a focus on the legal stuff. So let's get started. A few simple ideas to start off with, sort of safe AI. The first thing to think about, I guess, is bias. I think that's a key one when it comes to HR leaders. And just a quick sort of heads up on to get you thinking about bias. Several potential sources of bias in HR systems. Firstly, the source can be the training data. Think about that. Most of these AI tools have been trained on reading the internet. So if you ask them for, and they're better at this than they used to be, can you show me a picture of a nurse? It will produce you a picture of a female nurse, probably. Yeah. So that is sort of built in to a degree. You have to be mindful of that. The other issue on training data, and we've seen this, there's a famous study from Amazon where they built a sort of all-in-one sort of recruitment selection system. I'm going to show you a bit later on about AI shortlisting, which is a very different approach to what Amazon built, because what Amazon did was take a lot of data from the past recruiters' decisions, loaded that in, anonymized load of CVs or resumes as they would call them, and then said, use this as the data set. You've seen the decisions we made in the past. Here's a new bunch of applicants. Who are the people we need to be interviewing? And there was lots of bias in it because the AI worked out, there was bias in the original decisions, and the AI worked out a way of repeating that bias. Not deliberately, but it knew that the past decisions were what it was meant to follow. So it was working out things like, this college is if you're from this college, there's a greater chance you would not want to be selected. That was a negative data point. Well, that college, for example, was an all-female college. So there was bias in the decision about not inviting some females to technical interviews and stuff, possibly historical as well. That was probably worse a few years ago, hopefully. And they'd found the data point and were repeating it. Also things like if you played the cello, you were less chance of being selected. If you played chess, greater chance you were selected. Well, why? Well, because as a sort of more technical person, If you play cello, more likely you're a female. If you play chess, more likely you're a male. So it was just finding its own data points to reach that decision. The good thing about AI is when it makes decisions, it can typically, or good AI can, tell you what it used to make that decision. But you can start to see if you ask it to make decisions based on a data set of past decisions, you've got to be very careful that those past decisions that you're training it on are as free from bias as possible. Okay, now the algorithm, if the training data is flawed, the algorithm it produces will be flawed. And then finishing off, AI systems quite often designed by males, many of them based on, west coast of California, and because they're in a small little pocket. They don't have the wonderful diversity of global diversity. So maybe there's the potential for it to be biased by, the expectations, the lived experience of the people developing it as well. Those are just a few. There's many more options for bias on that as possible. Things to think about with GDPR, because GDPR, we don't have an AI, this is more Ryan's area, but we don't have AI legislation in this country, so it's the existing legislation that's taken effect. Well, first up, we know that systems involved in making decisions around, who's going to be shortlisted and stuff are listed as high risk. You may very well need a data protection impact assessment. Typical high risk activities are, if you're automating, if you're automatically rejecting applicants, is a really key thing. In almost all occasions where I've seen AI running in recruitment, I know there are some examples where this is not the case, but all of our competitors who are building recruitment software with AI shortlisting, the AI is not making a decision. It's sort of rating the applicant and letting the human step in and make the final decision. And that will be because, one, they want the checks and balances, two, because the customer probably feels more comfortable with that, and three, possibly the most important, it's easier to maintain compliance with GDPR because you're not asking the technology to make the entire decision and reject an applicant, for example. Okay, and then a few other things. I like this. We're going to see if we can get a few answers on the chat to this as well. Anonymized data. I'm going to get you to play the anonymized data game because it's interesting to think about what data you're putting into these systems, whether that's Copilot or ChatGPT. Can I put in a list of this type of data? Can I put in advert copy? Well, typically advert copy is a very safe place to go with it because there's no personal identified information within that. So you're a lot safer with that. But if I was to show you this sort of set of data here, we've got data set 1, data set 2, and data set 3. Are any of these sets of data actually anonymized? Yeah, well, I'd love to hear what people are saying on the chat. I can't actually see the chat, I don't think, but I'm not sure what people would predict. But because we're maybe a little pushed for time, I want to show you lots of live stuff today that realistically, and I'm going to get Ryan's view on all of this in a bit when we bring him in, data set 2 is probably safe as I see it because its location is a bit vague. It's general enough that these people were perhaps protected, but I'd say that to the point. If you only have 2 people in customer support, then it wouldn't be hard to work out who this person was if this data was shared, company-wide or something like that, for example. Payroll number can be used as an identifier, but only if you have the additional data to sort of match it through with payroll number to match it to the person. Obviously, the first set of data is not. So really, data set 2 is probably more comfortable with, and data set 3 has got postcodes on, which don't single out a single house, but probably close enough that it starts, perhaps you get close to sort of discomfort on that. And then other things you might want to think about as well. I think this is really key with some of the things we'll talk about later. There's lots of new opportunities for you to do stuff with AI, but then if you're going to take a candidate's data in particular and do something new with it, and I'll give you an example of that in a second, you need to update your privacy policy. And I've got a newsletter that I write on AI. I will pick it up here and bring it into view. I put it out every fortnight. And I did a little bit of research because I looked at some of the actual, I looked at some of the case studies for people that were actively involved in AI. They're like, well, there've been companies that have been listed. Here's my newsletter. But companies that have been listed as using AI, they're in a case study saying, "Oh, we use AI," and I went and looked at their privacy policy, and they got in 5 examples, and very, very few companies were talking about their AI usage. Yeah. So here we go. So is your privacy policy? So that we've got lots of articles around these types of things. I also looked at 20 FTSE 100 companies to see if any of them were talking about their AI usage. Only a couple were, and it was very, very slim how they mentioned it. So the reality is you don't need to, I'll let Ryan comment on this in a second, but my understanding of the law is you don't need to confirm you're using AI in your privacy policy. It's not, but you do need to, obviously, along with GDPR, you need to be able to confirm what you're doing with people's data. So if, for example, you actually got permission, you actually started capturing interview transcripts, and then you were using that data to train your managers on how to be a better interviewer, which is eminently doable with AI, that would be okay, as long as you get the permission and your privacy policy is updated to say, oh, we will be using, interview data to do this with it. So that's it, because I think there's a lot of new use cases out there of things you can do, but people are probably jumping ahead and doing them, and then things are out of date. Maybe they're not asking the right permissions. Maybe the privacy policies are not set up correctly. I'm probably going to stop there and bring Ryan in, because first time I'm doing this with Ryan. So I'm jumping through a lot of stuff here. I'm sure he's got some comments. I don't want to go too far into the next step about automated decision making, but I guess, Ryan, you might have some comments on what we've covered so far.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. With the anonymized data, firstly, obviously, data set 2 is the one that's, as you say, most likely to be safe, but as you say, it does depend. Someone in the comments said that they didn't think any of them were anonymized, and as you say, a lot of this stuff, and it'll be a running theme I think throughout today, is that a lot of it's contextual based. There's no one size fits all. Same with the privacy policies and things like that, which I'll touch on again in a minute. But the having anonymized data is great, as long as it's truly anonymized. And at the end of the day, what we have to remember with this stuff is personal data isn't just stuff that actually names them. It's anything that I can potentially identify that person. So, if there is only one person in customer support from Northants and everybody everybody knows that, then clearly that's not going to be anonymized. The other thing that I find that a lot of people do is they'll pseudonymize data. I'm an employment lawyer. I've also got a background in corporate commercial, and we find very often in your due diligence process, employment contracts would be redacted, but then they change it to their initials, and it's like, well, clearly initials are not a good pseudonym. It should be employee 1, employee 2, or payroll numbers potentially. But I mean, if payroll numbers go to someone in payroll, it's going to be fairly easy to identify them. So a lot of this stuff is very contextual based. You've got to really think about the reason behind what you're doing, not just what you're doing. Same with your contracts. So moving then on to the privacy policy stuff, and you said that you don't have to say that you're using AI, but you do have to say if you are processing the data using automated means or what have you. And that's true, but obviously if any data is being shared with AI, then they need to be told where it's going at and to which one. Since Brexit, obviously we now have 2 lots of GDPR. We have the EU GDPR and we have the UK GDPR, and we've got to balance both. And the UK GDPR is actually more stringent to some extent, because you aren't allowed to transfer data outside of the UK, whereas before it was outside the EEA, which was a far bigger area. And people don't think about the fact that Microsoft has all of its servers overseas, and it's doing all that data impact assessments, data process impact assessments, all that sort of stuff to make sure that you're actually following through with this. People treat this stuff a bit like a tick box exercise. Oh, have we done that? Have we done? But actually, that's quite dangerous. Just go and tick, we've got a privacy policy. Yeah, but does it work? Is it effective? Does it actually? What are we trying to do here? I suppose is where I would go with this. But yeah, I mean, everything you've said so far. There's a few things that I was going to touch on later that you've actually already ticked off the list, which is great, because it means we're all on the same page.
Yeah, there's common themes, isn't there? Certainly, one of the key ones obviously is automated decision making. So you see this at the moment. If you were to go for, a car insurance quote, and there isn't a human processing you to see whether you're valid to get that car insurance quote, it is done automatically. You're opting into that process of an automated decision. And the key one we see this on is, once again, sort of applicant screening, applicant shortlisting. I'm going to show you that. So I've already touched on the fact that there is tools that will go in and, I think maybe McDonald's in the UK, definitely McDonald's in the US are using a tool called Paradox AI, and you go into the process, you complete whatever assessments, you're probably confirming key things about, your right to work, and we'll go through the whole process, and it will say, great, you're scheduled in for an interview with this manager. It won't hire you. Amazon has one that goes end to end, by the way. They've done some of that, where you can be hired for their warehouse in the UK and you never speak to a human. Don't think that's a great recruitment process, but it depends on the situation. But that's where the AI is making actual decisions. Who gets to interview, who gets offered the job. But the vast majority of AI, and I think this is a huge misnomer with candidates, if you go and speak to your friends or family and ask them this question, I was rejected for a job, it's probably AI. Unlikely, very unlikely, really, from what we're seeing in the marketplace and what we've built. In most cases, it's not an automated decision, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Ryan, did you have anything more you wanted to add in regards to automated decision making?
No, I mean, I will touch on it again later when we come to the legal section, but I agree, that is one of the sort of key bits, especially in recruitment. I think the automated decision making is going to be quite an important bit to consider. But I'll touch on that again later. That's fine.
Yeah, and with our AI shortlisting, we've created a couple of blog posts for our customers, because I think the key thing with the AI is that you can explain it. So it's really easy to explain how it works. This is how it works, to both candidates and internally to your colleagues, and it's really transparent. So we've created those pages as well, knowing that if a candidate comes back to a client, they can share that page and it says this is how the AI works, which I don't see many other people doing, but I do feel like that is important. Not from a legal perspective, but from a trust perspective and a sort of ethical perspective, saying like, it's only fair that if you're using tools that you can explain, how they impact the process. Because I think there's a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that is important. And if ever you get questioned by the ICO, it's something that I always recommend when people are doing responding to a subject access request, that people very often will plow on, do the searches on Outlook, they'll remove stuff, they'll redact stuff, but they don't necessarily keep a log of what they've done. I always tell people you don't need to make it, War and Peace, but just, how did you do your search? Put the process out.
Yeah.
If you've removed something, what did you remove and why? Because although you don't share that data, if the ICO ever comes back and challenges, let's say a complaint gets put in, you've then got a little sort of file note that says this is what we did, this is how we did it, and it's made contemporaneously with the search, because at the end of the day you only have to do reasonable search, but you've got to be able to demonstrate, well, was it a reasonable search? And if you've got that process, same with the automated decision making, if you've got those processes, you've covered yourself, if ever they come asking questions.
Yeah, I think the more you use software, and obviously I'm biased on that, the more that stuff is just there. It's, there's a trail, whenever you're using software, there's an audit trail, isn't there? So let me show you, because individuals have the right not to be now, Ryan, you might have a better opinion on this than me. Obviously, I suspect you would do. But obviously, individuals can opt out of automatic decision making, and I find sometimes that this is either not explicit or even not available sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the whole opt-out, opt-in thing, the amount of companies that still have opt-outs for marketing, people just still aren't doing it. But yeah, the automated decision making, people just don't make it obvious enough. And I think with recruitment in particular, I think the thing is people are worried that if you tell people, they're all going to go, oh no, I don't want to do that, because they somehow feel like they're not going to be successful, or they don't want a robot to decide whether they get the job or not. But the whole point of GDPR, the whole principle of GDPR, is making people aware how you're using their data, what you're using it for, and what their rights are in respect of it. And they have that right to stop you processing it at any point. But the automated decision making, yeah, they should be made aware of it and given the option to say no. But yeah, people don't do it. I mean, the fact that we've still got companies not doing marketing opt-ins, still doing marketing, and I'm talking some big companies still doing it. I suspect they've taken the, well, you know what, we'll take the risk because we prefer to have the mailing list and we'll just pay if we have to, which is a very risky approach to take, and you've got to have deep pockets for it. But the fact that we've still got people doing that, yeah, they're definitely not doing the automated decision making, opt-outs, or even telling people they're doing it half the time, which is a huge risk.
Now, I'm actually going to go live in a second and show you some of this stuff working. This is what the genie is out of the lamp, is basically the whole section here. You can't go back to a world without AI. And I think a key issue, if you decide to ban or discourage, or you just don't get your plan in place for telling people how they need to use AI, if you don't give them a policy, in the same way if you didn't give them a policy about how to use IT, then the usage of IT would probably, the amount of viruses and phishing attacks you would have would probably be a lot more. So AI just falls into exactly the same camp as I see it. And we have this sort of shadow AI tools. Yeah. So people start using their own AI. And this already happens probably in many of your organizations. You maybe haven't set out a policy. You haven't said, these are the tools you're allowed to use. This is what you're allowed to do with them. Here's the training to go and support you with that. So you end up with people just using their own tools to get the job done. Okay. Few reasons for that. One, once you will always have like AI enthusiasts in the business. Obviously, I'm one of them in my business, and they will always want to be pushing the boundaries and testing stuff and using stuff. So they're always ahead of the policy in some respects. So, but you'll also have people who just go, actually, hold on a second. I can. I'm going to show you this live, by the way. My job is to screen CVs. I've got 200 applicants come in. Can I just ask ChatGPT to screen the CV? On an individual CV, yes. A handful of CVs, yes. I'm going to show you that in just a second. On hundreds of CVs, I updated these slides early in the week. I deliberately left the cross out as not yet to like, oh no, yeah, you can do this now. And I put, we're only months away from mainstream AI tools being able to handle like giving it hundreds of CVs and let it just churn away in the background while you go off to walk the dog, unload the dishwasher, whatever you particularly. I can see this particularly people working from home a lot, of going, well, I can just, you know. So I think it's important to use AI tools as a business and understand the levels of productivity that you can expect, and you move ahead like that as an organization. Otherwise, you might be paying someone to do 8 hours work and they're doing it in 2 hours, but their output is still what you're historically used to. And I'm going to show you that live. But the reason I said this is available now, you may or may not have seen this announcement. It's called Claude Cowork. Claude is one of the main AI tools out there. You may not have heard about it. It's heavily used by developers, but they've now built a tool. It's $100 a month. It only works on Apple Mac, so I've not been able to test it. And you can just point it towards a folder, tell it what to do, and it will go away and it will just work and work for maybe an hour, however long it takes, and it will deliver you that result. And it can do a whole myriad of different things, including going up on the internet and booking a restaurant for you and all these other things. But it's a proper co-worker that's there. And that's the first time we've seen that in a mainstream tool. I expect ChatGPT, etc., to follow that with their own versions of it, including Copilot. But what I want to do now, enough PowerPoint, I want to actually go live and show you rogue CV screening. Okay, so let me just bring up our friend ChatGPT here. I would like to add, I've got a lot of dummy CVs. These are actual dummy CVs I've created. You'll see them all here, like with ChatGPT. Now they will have some, when I've said, I'll create me a dummy CV for this, I'll drop about 8. I think you can drop about 10 files into any of these, into a normal ChatGPT conversation. That will expand over time, but at the moment it's 10. I can then drop this in and say, look, here's the job spec. Go away and tell me who's pros and cons, who's a good fit. Now, some of these CVs, it might actually say, you know, Neat House Partners and real company names, but they're all dummy CVs. I have to stress that. It'd be a bit silly doing this webinar with, yeah, I've done that. So now, one of the tips I'm going to give you, because the next section is all about prompting, is using voice prompts. So I use it all the time. There's a little button down here, but I've got it on my PC, so I don't actually type in my prompts as much as possible. I've already attached 8 CVs. Can you go ahead and review them against the job spec as per the original prompt? So I just type that in and away you go. I'll explain why I use voice prompt. Obviously, one, you've worked out is because I'm lazy. The job advert is not technically accessible. Okay, fine. Let me just grab the job advert. I thought it would be able to find it, but that's fine. I will just, actually, I've actually got the job advert saved as a document in that same folder. So let's just drop the job advert in. Here is the job advert. Please hurry up and get on with it. Now, the reason I'm saying hurry up and get on with it is because I'm trying to encourage it not to ask many questions, to just, oh no, it's actually started going through it. Okay, so it's going through each person already. What did it do? Did it predict? Yeah, the role is not, I'm gonna, yeah, okay, so it started predicting. I'm just gonna give it the actual job spec and now I'll actually go through it again. But you can sort of say, it actually, that in itself was problematic. I gave a URL and it just went, oh yeah, I can't see the URL. I'm gonna try and work out, I know roughly what you want. Now imagine if you've got an inexperienced person there, it's actually trying to rate me the candidates. And now that rating might very well change once I actually give it the actual job spec. Here's the summary so you can move quickly. Okay, Alejandra, not a good fit. Let's see, Amrit, very good fit. Tells me why. Okay, but there's a list of requirements. I'll just give you one example here. Firstly, we don't really know what it's using to make its decision making. Yeah, there's a list of requirements against the job. I could show you that, but you can probably imagine what it's like. I haven't really told it what are the really important requirements and what are the ones that are not so important. So I haven't given it a lot of instructions. The actual prompt I used was really small. The level of prompt and the way that someone uses ChatGPT is going to be very, very different, with maybe different outcomes, different potential for bias to fall in. I could, maybe we're looking for a receptionist. I could say, I just want a young girl to work on reception. ChatGPT might warn me against that and say, oh, that's not very, you know, but it doesn't necessarily, it wouldn't stop me from doing that. If I said I want, one of the requirements might be something that wouldn't appear on a CV, like I need the person, it might be on the person spec, must be able to work independently. Now that might not be the easiest thing to determine on a CV. Someone who writes on their CV that bland statement we've all read, I'm capable of working in a team or working independently. The AI might go, oh, there it is. They've explicitly stated they're capable of working independently. Excellent. Maybe it will look for evidence within a job work experience, but sometimes it might just take that as read. So that's sort of what I call rogue. You know, we've gone rogue. There isn't a set of policies, procedures. I'm using ChatGPT today. Maybe tomorrow I'll use Copilot. But obviously software companies like us are trying to build a more robust process to this. So if I just show you how this works in our system, let me come out here and go to edit. When we put when the user puts the job on, they set out the AI shortlisting questions. We actually control it by, they have to choose the first half of the question. So we're actually controlling it. So that, you know, so that said, applicants should have experience in, should be qualified in. So we're sort of setting the scene, and then they'll fill out the rest of this. So they've said these 3 extra questions. And we think it's simple as that. 3 questions. The AI is doing an overview and rating candidates who appear to be a good fit. And the other key thing it's doing is it's clearly rating people who clearly don't meet the criteria, which, as you guys will well know, there's a decent amount of applicants who apply today, and even more so going forward with the use of AI, that we will see that don't have the experience. So first up, this is all dummy candidates. I can go and rate by AI score, and I can fill that. I can filter by commutable time as well. That's coming through of AI. Let me just scroll down through. So these are just scores out of 100. Once again, you're thinking, well, how does this work? Let me click on David Fake candidate here, and we get the summary. And what happens is we've got the 3 questions. They're all rated out of 10. That's rounded up into a score out of 100 because that's easier to sort of understand than 30, and you get the general idea. So, and you can just see, if I just quickly do one of these, this person has CIPD level 5, they it's 10. They need experience of working in a role with HRIS implementation. No, some experience working for HRIS, but not an implementation. And then we need them to have, and this is a good question to ask, experience working within a software company. The AI will keep going out and checking every job that's there to say, is this a software company? In the same way, if I said I need them to have experience working in a high growth SME, that might be a bit more challenging, but it will certainly work out who's an SME. It might look for who's got evidence that they're a high growth, but that's harder to do. But certainly clarifying whether they're an SME or not via a LinkedIn profile search is quite easy to do. So it can actually do it can answer quite a decent job. And this is just pretty standard AI. We're not using anything too cutting edge here. Okay, it's probably a very similar level to what we did with ChatGPT. Hopefully we get a little summary that sort of builds trust with the user so they can see the AI is doing its job. because you will see, and these are just a dummy example, but there's lots of applicants down the bottom who clearly don't meet any of the criteria. So yeah, it's up to you how much time and effort you want to put into those candidates. But that's just a brief example of the two ways that you either sort of, in my mind, if that's an ongoing big task for you, you either provide that as a solution, you find a solution to do it, and I'll show you how you can do it with a custom GPT later on, which is a bit more controlled, or you risk people just doing it in their own style. Okay, so a few other ideas then to get proactive, or best practice ideas to learn AI. I'll do this quickly. First tip, just stop Googling. Remove that instinct. If you want to get better with AI, stop Googling. Have the instinct, firstly, to check with AI. Can AI do it? There's lots of different types of AI. Download them to your phone and use it in your personal life as well. Yeah. So that's a very easy tip. So you want to be, just stop Googling. It boggles me when I interact with people now. I'm a little bit, my kids all use AI and stuff, as you can imagine. There's other family members that will reach out to me and say, oh, I've Googled it and it said this. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you'd have done it with AI, you could have asked the follow-up question as well, and another follow-up question, and you'd have just got the answer rather than trying to read websites, which feels a little bit 2022. Other learning, sign up for an AI newsletter. I mentioned that I've got a newsletter all about recruitment, but you might be interested in an AI HR newsletter. Sign up for one thing, just so you're reading one newsletter a week or a month. It's telling you what's going on in your sector. You're getting more comfortable with what is a whole new set of terminology. And that will mean that you're more comfortable having those conversations. So you'll open up your access to internal conversations across your business and other customers and colleagues. So you'll feel comfortable using phrases like LLMs or generative AI, so lots of different things. Okay, and then I wanted to do another little practical bit before we jump back over with Ryan. I want to go with some ideas to improve prompting. This is going to be fast, but I've got other webinars, and if you're interested, you can reach out to me. We've got recordings of webinars around ChatGPT, Copilot, lots of whatever your preference is. We've got beginners, we've got advanced versions. I've got recordings and webinars we've got set up, and don't forget, I can do an hour's free training across any aspect of AI. It's not training so much, it's more helping you to work out where to get started, what the challenges are, where the opportunities are. So the first up, as I mentioned, I use voice. So let's think about something at the moment. Let's say we want to generate a job advert for a new role who's going to be, legal counsel for our pharmaceutical company. I need to create a job advert for legal counsel for our pharmaceutical company. We've been going as a business about 50 years. This role is going to be really key. It's the first time we've hired for it. They're going to have a lot of autonomy in this role, but they are going to have to come from a pharmaceutical background, ideally as well, maybe some experience working with US pharmaceuticals. Now, I'm just doing that with voice, just to give you an idea. You'll see how it drops in. Don't forget, you could just use your own little button here as well. I can verbally vomit onto the prompt all of the ideas I've got for this, and it will go away and write me a job advert. Equally, I might say, can you ask me a series of other questions I might need to know to help me get all the information you need to write a truly engaging and well thought out job advert that uses best practice? Oh, I pushed go before I let it actually drop the extra prompt in. Anyway, it's going to go right. I could do more on that as well. Okay. That's the first tip, is voice. Yeah. The next way of doing it, there's a tip called reflect on stuff. So I could ask it, so can you reflect and summarize on what's really important for a highly engaging job advert? Now, this is something that I don't necessarily use a lot, but it is accepted that you get better results. It could be useful to do, particularly if you're building, as I'll show you later, building a custom GPT. You might get it to do this step first, and then do what we can do now is we could say, now we say, I want you to write a job advert. Now, once it's reflected on and taken time, just like a human, bizarrely, would think about, well, what's the best way of writing a job advert? What's the really key parts to it? It will probably go and write a slightly better advert, bearing in mind this. Or I could say, I don't agree with number 7, get rid of that. I don't agree with a call to action or whatever else. So, and then it would write like that. So once again, I could use voice. Now, the other way of doing it, this is called meta prompting. And this is the last one I'll show you. Meta prompting is the best tip I'll give. Well, I love voice. I really love voice. Meta prompting is also really, really cool. So meta prompting is where you ask it to build the prompt. Okay. It's like a bit Inception, a prompt to build the prompt, which if I show you will make more sense. I want to analyze our privacy policy to see whether there's any anything I need to be aware of, any challenges to it, any concerns you could immediately see that I need to speak to, maybe get some legal advice on, but I've no idea what I need to be looking for. Can you write me a prompt that will be a comprehensive analysis, also that it could compare our privacy policy to 2 or 3 of our competitors as well? I don't know why I've decided. I've been invited on a webinar with our legal services friends to start using AI to do some of their work. But hopefully it's going to, you're going to get legal advice at the right point in time. It will tell you you've got a problem. So now it's going to write the prompt for me. Okay. And it will write a better prompt for this task than I can. So that's called meta prompting. Works really, really well. Okay. So that's just a few ideas there. You could go a bit further and play a bit further with it. I think a key thing that I should say as well, and I had a colleague of mine say this, very junior person say this the other day, because we built equivalent of a custom GPT, which I'm going to show you in a bit, like this custom tool that does a certain task. It's got all the instructions like pre-built in. And my colleague said, oh, it gave out the error. It was writing the webinar email we send, and it said, oh, come along to this webinar on Monday, February the 18th or something. February 18th, I think, was a Tuesday. And the AI just got it wrong. The fact that it was a Monday. We gave it February 18th, but maybe we didn't put the year on there. Maybe, I don't know. So it got it wrong. You always have to read this information. Yeah, as good as you think, oh, that's really cool. It's a really detailed prompt. I would read that prompt and try and improve it before I used it. Okay, unless I'm in a webinar and really push for time, which is not really a reality. So yeah, always read the outputs it gives you. Read it read if you're using a meta prompting, read the prompt before you actually deploy it as well. Okay, because you'll probably be undoubtedly the prompt you're not going to necessarily see a problem with, but you're probably going to be able to see things that you can improve, and you get a better, in this case, a better report on privacy policies. Okay. Other tip would just be carry on asking questions. What have I missed? What is that? Can you improve it? If I was going to improve it, what would it look like? But that's all just playing with it. The more you get back, the more you have back and forth, you need to be the most inquisitive version of yourself, because you'll get better results. Okay, let me go back to my slides, because that keeps me on the straight and narrow. So we've done prompting masterclass. I also want to talk about building AI into your workflows. So I'm going to show you some cool stuff here. So think about where AI is being used across HR departments. Content production, that's the easiest one. Probably quite moderately safe. We're going to talk about risk in a second, and I'll bring Ryan back in for that. Scheduling interviews, chatbots to answer questions. Going to show you one of them in a second. HR systems, performance management, L&D, employee retention. This is definitely one that I think is predicting employee turnovers and suggesting actions to reduce it. So when it's telling you that people in this team over here, or this person here is a high risk to churn, it's like, I'd really want to know how the AI is reaching that decision. It's a great example of what I call black box AI, where the AI is doing something, but nobody, when I'm on a stand at a show and someone says, oh, we've got a tool that does this, I go, well, how does that work? And they're like, oh yeah, there's an algorithm and there's, blah, 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 but they never really tell you, either because they don't know or they're not allowed to. Okay. Any task that involves repetition, large amounts of data, particularly unstructured data, decision-making based on patterns. So like, this is how we've wrote our job advert in the past. Can you help us write job adverts going forward? That's the type of thing that AI is going to be really good at solving. And then I've just got a few tasks here. And we've got this one. If you're starting out on this journey, which is a bit of an assumption that many of you are, some of you might have already done a few things. When you're thinking of which tasks to automate, this is not a bad way of thinking about it. What you really want is stuff here in the red zone, where it's a high value, but actually it's low risk. Okay, so I would put like CV screening. Where's our friend CV screening? Somewhat challenging. Yeah, CV screening, shortlisting against criteria, which is CV screening. I would definitely put that in the high value, because you get so many applicants through. But I would also definitely put it in the high risk area as well. And then over on the right hand side, we've got the final factor in this is like, how easy is it to achieve? Because if you can take something that's relatively easy, that's low risk, even if it's low to mid value, it's probably worth doing. Okay, so maybe interview question generation. you know, having a template, having a process. I'll show you a GPT I've built for that in just a second. Ryan, any comments on this?
No, I mean, I agree. I think, as you say, checking things once they've been generated, you've gone through a lot about what you put into it, how you input it. You get out as good as you put in with this stuff, and we see it time and time again. In fact, I'll touch on again later, but I had a case where the person on the other side was corresponding with us, didn't have a solicitor involved, but was producing these legal letters, but was missing the point. And they were well written, but they'd overlooked, because obviously he'd put in his biased view of what this claim was, and so he'd got a letter out that was also very biased and didn't actually sort of sit well within the actual facts and the law, and it was quite frustrating to have to deal with. But you only get as good as you put out. You only get out as good as you put in. But even then, you know, again, I'll touch on it in a minute. But you know, there's been horror stories of people going into court citing references that don't exist. One of my friends is a lecturer, senior lecturer at Bristol University, and he had someone produce a paper that had got references that they just completely made up. It referred to a sociologist who'd been dead for 200 years commenting on something that had happened 3 years ago, and it was like, hang on a minute, how's he done that? He's been dead for 100, you know, he was dead 100 and odd years before that happened. But you know, so this is where, you know, you still got to sense check this stuff. You know, even with the stuff that's low risk, there's still risk, and for me, the biggest thing is yeah, checking it, not just taking it at face value. It goes back to the old days when we were at university, which was you always go back to the source material just to check it. Don't take secondary sources as read. But yeah, so I think there's a lot to be gained from this, but I think mapping it out as you've done and knowing which ones you want to touch on and which ones are good, you know what, actually we'll steer clear of that, I think is really important.
Yeah, and you probably already have, I mean, we're an ISO accredited organization, so we have like solid processes here for rolling stuff out using new software. So it's all that stuff that you fall back on a little bit. Today, I'm just going to show you stuff. I'm going to show you so a little bit of automation here. So this is a custom GPT. I have several webinars showing how to build these if you're interested. So in simple terms, if I show you how this works, you need to be a paid for user of ChatGPT to build these. You put a logo on it, you give it a title, you give it a description, that creates all this, and then you give it instructions, just like a prompt. Yeah. In fact, you can meta prompt these instructions. Hey, I'm building a custom GPT that will do this. Can you build me a set of instructions? The instructions are very, very similar to a prompt. Okay, for the most part, a few little nuances, but I'm not going to go into them now. And then you can also build in knowledge areas. So I could, if you've got like, this is a job advert creator, I could put like 5 example outputs, like really good job adverts that we like and that are in our organization's tone of voice, etc., etc. And I could put them in there as an output. And then this can be used if I go, you know, let's get started. I need to generate some interview guidance notes. We can just test it out here. It will ask me a series of questions. I probably won't have time to fully go through, but you'll get the general idea. Please provide job description, scoring criteria. I'm going to do this super quick. So I haven't got a job description. I just need this done super quick. I am recruiting for a HR manager. Scoring criteria is going to be experience of leading a team, really strong knowledge of HRIS systems, and I also need them to be really good with AI. Can you just give it your very best guess of producing all this content for me? No more questions. I'm not normally this rude in my day-to-day life, but as you'll see, time is of the essence, and it will produce a guided pack of like, here's the start for you, here's how we recommend you start. Here's the, let's check the process of the candidate, introduce the organization, where the role fits. Now, this is generic. Obviously, if you did it for your organization, you'd probably have that very specifically laid out as to like, when we, always include the description of our organization, always detail it like this, explain where the role fits, explains our commitment to DEI, blah, 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 blah. And it gives lots and lots of stuff here. It gives a question, it sort of says follow-up questions and lots of other stuff. You get the idea. The other one that's also cool, I'll show you this other automation, which is over in Teams. We've built a HR answer agent. So now this agent's quite interesting. You can build an answer agent quite easily. And what you do with an answer agent, you give it a set of policies or documents where you've got a good data set. So the good thing with like a lot of HR questions that come into first line support, can you explain our bereavement policy? People can't remember that. We've given it our employee handbook, 124 pages document. So it will read that and it will give our staff an answer. Okay, much easier, and they can use this obviously on the fly. Much if they, God forbid, had a family member pass away, they can just hop onto this agent, ask the question. It takes a bit of time. It answers it. The rules have been set so that it knows only to answer questions if the answer is held within that document. Yeah. So looks like it's actually struggling now. Can you have another go at explaining our bereavement policy? Oh, agreement policy. Let's type that wrong. Okay, well, my voice has not been captured very well there. This is taking its time. There we go. Right. Right, it's just answering something random. Let me just say, okay, I would like to know about holiday allowance and rolling them over at the end of the year. Typical question that might come into HR departments. So I think this is definitely in my mind, if you built it like this in a very secure way, and the AI here is secure, it won't go out and do its own little thing and check the internet and say, oh, other companies typically do this. So I know you're a software company, so other software companies do this, so we'll just assume that you do this. It won't do that. It will stick to the rules in this regard. So I think this probably falls into that. If you've got a HR department, for example, lots of queries come into it, this probably falls into that sort of high value, easy to deploy, and low risk, that sort of perfect trilogy of attributes that we're probably looking for that first project. But yeah, that's just giving you an idea. That's a co-pilot agent that once it's built can be added into Microsoft Teams. So, and then with the custom GPT, that's obviously just something that we've built, can be shared and our staff can use. We also use a lot of Claude skills here, which are fascinating. The benefit with Claude skills, I'll just tell you this quickly, you can tell it to build something and just via like chatting away to it, it will build it. I can then use it. Imagine I used it to create a job advert and it did it okay, but it used numbered lists instead of bullet points. I could say, can you change the job advert from numbered lists to bullet points? Oh, and also, can you update the skill in the background that I've trained you on how I like you to build my job adverts? And it will do both of those tasks. So you're not having to go in and like play about with the instructions or anything. You can literally just do it on the fly. Claude skills is, our marketing team use it, it's just the easiest thing to use. It's just so lovely. Right, so I'm going to throw this up and then we're going to go to Ryan to finish off, I think. So this is I've mentioned it a couple of times. I'm keen to talk to people who are interested in talking about AI. I'm responsible for building AI into our software product. We've got several different routes we can go down, but it's really important that we have an understanding of, where customers are, where other people are, what their challenges are, where they see the obstacles, those types of things. So as part of having a conversation with you guys, I will naturally pick up on talking to more people who are rolling out AI, thinking about AI. It's just in my benefit to have those conversations. So if you're interested, scan that QR code and you'll get my calendar that you can book in. It's books for an hour. You don't have to use an hour. We could just use half an hour. I have that conversation quite often with like CEOs, HR managers. They might bring the head of IT in as well. And it is very open. It's like, Adrian, we're really interested in using Copilot, or we know we've got this challenge over here. We're wondering if we can automate it, or our staff are a little bit resistant. We need to get a pro. How do we even think about rolling this out? Whatever those ideas, if I can't find the answer, I can probably direct you in a good path forward with some other ideas of other places that will help you. So feel free to book into that. I'm going to leave it on screen for another 5 seconds if you want to scan it. If you don't want to scan it, you can just message me on LinkedIn. Sol's going to put my LinkedIn profile on the chat as well. You can just message me there straight away if you prefer. Yeah. I have whizzed through that. I do talk this fast normally, just so we can I don't want to cut away from Ryan's part. But Ryan, we're going to let you lead this part, I think, and then you're going to give us a few things that people need to be thinking about as well.
Yeah, of course. So I thought it'd be easier just to run through a few bits, not really any slides, because I wanted to bounce off some of the stuff that you were talking about. I mean, in terms of AI in the workplace from a HR perspective, obviously we've touched on the recruitment. It's a big part of it. It's somewhere where it can be really useful, as long as you do it in the right way. I'll touch on that again in a minute. But for me, what I'm finding is that there are sort of two main categories of the risks from an employment law and a HR perspective. The first is what your employees are doing day to day and how they're using AI. And the second is when something goes wrong, or you have a disgruntled employee, them using AI against you. And that's, okay, staff have a right to bring grievances and then make subject access requests and all of that sort of stuff. But as I said earlier, you only get what you put in, and if you go into it biased, as employees often will, if they're feeling aggrieved, they're going to put in a very emotionally driven prompt, and they're going to get something out that's reflective of that. And unfortunately, a lot of people do take what they get out of AI as gospel, and they will sort of go, okay, well, AI said I am entitled to X, Y, and Z. And so they then laser focus on it instead of then going and speaking to somebody, speaking to an advisor or whatever, and getting a bit more of a reality check. So what you find is sometimes you have these employees who are on a rampage because they've read something on ChatGPT that says they can do X, Y, and Z, and there's no telling them that they're wrong, and it's how you manage that. And then we do find that. In fact, today, before this call, I had a phone call with someone where we had just that, and it was very obvious that it was AI generated because of the formatting, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But it was very obvious, and there was nothing wrong in terms of what they were asking for, but it just kind of missed the point a little bit, and it was very clear that that was because what they'd put into AI wasn't great. So that is a big thing at the moment in terms of tribunal claims. A report in September last year said that they were finding that up to 32% rise in caseload for the tribunals because of AI generated grievance and tribunal claims. So actually people getting them to write the grievances, getting them to write the particulars of claim, they'd actually seen a 32% rise in caseload. That was at ACAS and tribunal. And 42% on disability discrimination in particular, where they'd been AI red flagged as being a contributor, which on the one hand potentially is access to justice for people. But again, it comes down to, well, are they putting in the right stuff to get something decent out? And ultimately, we then have to do a response to this stuff in a way that, is meaningful without saying this is a load of rubbish because AI has produced it. So that's the one side. It's creating backlogs in the tribunals, and it's creating more work for HR teams having to deal with these grievances that have been produced by AI. They might miss the point slightly. It is creating more work. Same with data subject access requests. Maybe people wouldn't have necessarily done that if they'd not been prompted by AI. And I'm sure most of the people on this call have come across the subject access requests at some point and know just how much of a drain on resources those things are to have to deal with. So that stuff is becoming more prevalent because people are asking AI, they are getting answers, and then they very often will prompt and say, you're entitled to it. Would you like me to draft the letter for you? Yes, please. And then they get a letter, but then they don't check it and they just send it, and then you've got to then deal with it. And it is creating a massive drain on resources. The other thing is employees using it in the workplace, which I think is the one that really we're focused on today. My colleague has put a link in the chat to a policy that we've produced for people to use in their handbook. It's a master template. It's not specific to anyone's industry or business, so we always recommend that you have it checked by one of our lawyers. But it gives you a flavour of the sort of stuff that you should be thinking about when you are using AI in the workplace, and there's a real focus on auditing usage and also restricting usage. So I'm sure some of you will have heard about Hill Dickinson, obviously City law firm, did a 7-day test where they monitored usage of AI last year, and they found 32,000 hits over a 7-day period. They have just over 1,000 staff, so it worked out at about 30 hits per employee in that week. So it just, that's assuming everybody used it, and obviously they won't. So clearly there was a big use of it, but the reason why it ended up in the paper is because Hill Dickinson weren't aware of how much. They knew AI was around, people using it, but they didn't quite appreciate how much their staff were using it without their knowledge. And so what they did was a blanket ban and just went, no more AI, which everybody went, oh, well, if Hill Dickinson doing it, it must be dangerous. And actually what they did was they said, no more AI till we get a policy in place. And then once we've got a policy and a system in place, then we'll start to open it back up. And the policy that we've prepared, that we've shared the template for, kind of does that. It's about having a list of, these are the approved AI systems you are allowed to use. These are the ones you are not allowed to use. This is how you use them. These are the things you can't do on them. It also includes a reference to, we will monitor AI usage, and that's really important because transparency, you know, we talked earlier on about making people aware of automated decision making. You know, a big part of GDPR is about that transparency. The reason you have a privacy policy is to say, this is the data we collect, this is how we collect it, this is how we use it, this is who we share it with, because people obviously have that right, statutory right to know about that stuff. Obviously, from an employee perspective, if people are using AI and you are monitoring it to see how much people are using it, then you need to be telling them in your privacy policy with your employees or in your AI policy that you're doing that. There always needs to be human intervention as well. That's the other thing. I've kind of touched on it, and you've touched on it as well, that giving people training on how to use this stuff. It's all good and well saying, right, well, these are the approved AIs that we can use, but, you know, telling people, you know, not sharing confidential information. You know, it's very easy for someone to say, oh, okay, I just want an overview of this report, or I know a company, not one of my clients, but I've got a friend who works at a company there, and he deals with complaints, and he was telling me that he would get, you know, these 7, 8, 9 pages of complaint off members of the public. He would put them through ChatGPT to get a synopsis to then do the response. It's like, well, first, you've probably missed some bits in there you need to respond to. And secondly, you've just put a complaint letter into ChatGPT with all their details in it, their name, their address. I bet you haven't told them, and I bet there's nothing in your policy saying that you should do that. I mean, that's a huge breach potentially of GDPR, especially if there's sensitive data in there, special category data, you know, health related stuff, you know, minimizing that as much as possible. Yeah, when I've used AI at work, you know, you never put client information in there. You say, you know, an employer in this industry, and it's usually when you're trying to generate something as a starting point for a policy or a bit of research to, you know, something very nuanced. And that's what I tend to use for. But it goes back to that thing then of, you do it, but then there's that human intervention level. The same with the automated decision. You know, you might get the CV screen, but then you still have that human intervention level. That's really important. And I think that's the thing that potentially is the biggest risk in terms of auditing how much people are using this stuff, making sure that people are using it properly, putting the right prompts in, and that they're checking those sources. You know, where has that information come from? You talked about black box, you know, how has it done it? You know, if we're talking about CVs and recruitment, you know, you really need to understand, well, how is it vetted? What's it used? What's it compared it to? Because as you touched on earlier, you know, there are risks from a discrimination point of view. You know, the Equality Act, you know, people are very good at spotting discrimination issues when they occur with employees, but they sometimes forget that you can make a discrimination claim, you know, whether you're an employee or not, you know, because if you are to feel discriminated against in the recruitment process, it's the same thing. I mean, there's been at least 2 cases, tribunal cases with Uber, where Uber's software for accessing their systems used facial recognition, and clearly it because of how it had been trained on mainly Caucasian faces, and so 2 black drivers both were unable to get access to the system, were locked out of it because the AI made a false assumption about their identity. It couldn't read the face, and so there was an indirect racial discrimination claim there. And I suspect Uber probably weren't even aware of it. They put this, I think it was based on Microsoft AI, and they used it, they utilized it, they put it in place, but they hadn't checked it, they hadn't audited it. And so these things happen. And so that's something we do need to be mindful of. As you say, you know, if a CV's got someone's name on it, some names it's easier to sort of identify, and AI may make assumptions about racial origin or something like that, and it may filter that stuff out. but you won't know unless you ask the question. And having those processes in place, policies, but also auditing it, having a list of, well, this is what we did, this is how we did it. It one flushes out any potential discrimination so that you can correct it and go, no, 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 don't do that. You need to not include that stuff. But also, if you get questions on it by the ICO later, which again, that's something else that we're finding a lot more of ICO complaints, because again, people are asking the AI, what can I do? Why hasn't this happened? Oh, you reported here. It'll give you the details. It's really important. That being said, AI is really useful. I think it's going to make things a lot more efficient. I think used properly and trained properly, the staff and the AI, it will make a huge difference to productivity. I think the things to remember are, the Article 22 safeguards. So, meaningful human involvement, transparency at all times, giving people that right to contest, like you said, doing your data protection impact assessments, having the policies there, continually auditing it. Just because you give someone training, it's a bit like the EDI stuff. Just because you give them training once, they very often forget it. It's a bit like when you get a speeding ticket. People slow down for 6 months and then they start to creep up again. Not talking from experience there, of course, but keeping that stuff in place is really important, because the transparency helps in terms of avoiding claims, but also if you get them, how to deal with them. The auditing is really just that safeguard of, we don't realize how much our staff are doing without checking these things. The Hill Dickinson case is a prime example of that. 32,000 hits in a week is crazy when you think about it, but clearly people were doing it. But they took the right approach of going, right, we're going to stop it, get the policies in place, and then at least we know what's being used, how it's being used, and we can track it. And I think that's the biggest thing, really, because we are going to, it's not going away. And you will have people, I'm one of them. I like AI. I like the sort of, how you can use it for your calendars, the transcripts, all that sort of stuff. It can make work really efficient, but it's about knowing how to use it, and giving that training. If we can do that, it's great. If we're not doing it, huge liability.
Yeah, in my experience, a lot of people are not doing it. But yeah, what I did like about if I went to ChatGPT today and said, I've had an idea for a business, and imagine even if it was like a business that was, I don't know, something that was outdated and not likely to be that successful, ChatGPT would probably go to me, yeah, that's great. Should we work on a marketing plan? And I think maybe that's what's happened with these grievances a bit as well. People are saying, I think I've been discriminated against on this level. It's like saying, oh yeah, let's talk about drafting a letter.
Yeah,
rather than maybe evaluate it properly.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a subjective thing. I mean, as lawyers, we see it. I having come from private practice, did both sides of the coin. Not just the employer stuff, but also the employee stuff. And people will tell you what you want to hear sometimes because they want a specific answer. That doesn't change if you're asking the question of your solicitor sat in front of you or AI. If you put a question in that's biased or subjective based on emotion, you're going to get a response that is equally so. And yeah, it's an interesting thing to navigate, and I don't envy those companies that don't have access to a HR or legal, someone they can pick up and say the phone to and say, well, what do I do with this? We were doing this alone, because there is so much more of this stuff. I mean, a 32% increase in cases is huge, AI is great, but where someone might not pursue something, I think we're finding more and more AI almost giving people confidence. I think that's the thing, and we're finding people. In fact, I actually had someone say that an employee had come into a disciplinary meeting, having listened to AI about what to do. And they had a whole conversation about it. And this guy was genuinely serious and said, I ask AI everything. I ask it what I should have for breakfast in the morning. Because AI, because it's technology, and technology is faultless. It's not human. It's it's perfect. And it's like, oh, and obviously he's an extreme. But you've got some people who are literally running their lives by AI. And listen to it blindly. You see it in the news every day, and I think that sort of stuff it's scary. But you never know if you've got one of those employees sat in your office, which is why that auditing, is really important. In the same way about checking your emails, people being able to plug USB sticks into their laptops. We've got used to all that stuff now about, we know what employees do with most of our tech. and we have policies in place, but this AI, it's so fast moving. We don't have one single piece of legislation like the EU has their AI regulations. We don't have that. There's a white paper that the government put out. It gives you some indications, but we're kind of piecing together lots of little bits of law, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon. They don't want a prescriptive, one piece of legislation on AI, because as a country we are quite innovative. We are very tech focused. And AI's got lots of good things. It's just about making sure that we have those checks and balances in place, auditing, transparency, all the stuff I've already talked about.
Yeah, well, we probably need to wrap things up, I guess, Ryan. I don't see any questions come through. I think the last thing I was going to throw out there was the next scary bit with the wearables, which is where the AI companies are going. And once someone can, apparently OpenAI's people behind ChatGPT are building actual ear pods, but they sit behind the ear. So
Okay.
so that person can walk into the meeting with their ChatGPT lawyer, hearing the whole conversation and advising them. And anything you say in that meeting could then is there, isn't it? So you need, once again, very well trained staff.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I bought a new set of earbuds 2 days ago and downloaded the app, and there is a live transcription, a live translator built into them, where I can literally put these in my ear and have a conversation with someone who doesn't speak English, and it will live translate it for me into my ear, which is, when I was a kid, this is the sort of stuff that used to happen on spy films. Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Star Trek, the universal translator. Yeah,
exactly.
They'd land on another planet and just be able to talk to the aliens.
This is it. But we're there now. But as you say, that sounds like such a great thing potentially, and such a simple thing. But actually, when you look at all the what policies do you have in place for it if you're using it at work and whatever, they don't exist, because we're constantly having to catch up with this stuff. It's constantly moving feast. And just because you use our that template policy, that policy is great today. 6 months time, you may need to update it again because something else will have happened, and there'll be the next iteration. And I think that's the thing. It's such a moving feast. You've got to be ahead of the curve all the time.
I mean, the only thing we can confirm is that if you build software, or you're a lawyer in this space, you're going to be busy. So we're going to be busy. So that's good news from me and Ryan. You guys a bit more challenging, unfortunately, but we're here for you. And should we wrap things up? So, then, is there anything else we need to do at the end to wrap things up? I feel like I'm like I forget the name of the bird that comes in and steals the nest or whatever, but I feel like I've just taken over today.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's what we got you on for, to just run it and take over and say a piece. So yeah, happy for you to call it a day.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Good to run a session with you, Ryan. I enjoyed it. Hopefully we'll do one in the future.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.